The frozen wind screamed across the Colorado Ridge as Ethan Carter wiped sawdust from his hands, unaware that in 60 seconds, a half-naked stranger would be pounding on his door in the middle of a blizzard, and that saving her from hypothermia would unravel a conspiracy that could destroy them both. But before the lies, the threats, and the choice that would change everything, there was just a man, a storm, and a knock that shouldn't have come. If you want to see how a single act of kindness can turn into a fight for justice, stay with me until the end. And hey, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The mountains held their breath before the storm hit. Ethan Carter stood in his workshop, the smell of fresh-cut pine filling the air as his hands moved across the surface of an unfinished dining table. The grain beneath his fingertips told stories, years compressed into rings, seasons marked in color shifts from honey to amber. Outside the window, the first snow of the evening drifted past the glass like ash from a distant fire. He'd been working for 3 hours straight, ever since he'd put Mason to bed. His son, 6 years old, all elbows and questions, had finally crashed after an evening of building block towers and explaining in excruciating detail why velociraptors were actually kind of small, Dad, not like in the movies. Ethan smiled at the memory as he reached for the sandpaper. The workshop was his sanctuary, the one place where the noise in his head went quiet. No deadlines, no expectations, just wood, tools, and the satisfaction of making something useful with his own hands. The wind picked up outside, rattling the window frames. He glanced toward the glass. The weather report had mentioned a storm rolling in, but up here on the ridge, storms were part of the deal. You learn to read the sky, stock the pantry, and keep the generator maintained. Ethan had lived in this cabin for 4 years now. Ever since he'd walked away from his old life in Denver and decided that raising Mason alone meant doing it somewhere honest, somewhere quiet, somewhere far from the chaos that had swallowed his marriage whole. The cabin itself was modest but solid. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that opened into a living room with a stone fireplace, and this workshop tucked onto the back like an afterthought. He'd renovated most of it himself, learning as he went. There were still projects on the list. The guest room closet door hung crooked, the front porch needed reinforcing before next winter. But it was home. More importantly, it was theirs. Ethan set down the sandpaper and stepped back to examine the table. The surface was coming along. Another few passes and he could start on the finish. He was building it for the Hendersons, a couple down in Pine Ridge who'd commissioned a full dining set for their 30th anniversary. Good people. They'd paid half up front without asking, which meant they trusted him. That mattered. The wind howled again, louder this time. He walked to the window and peered out into the darkness. The trees along the ridge were bending, their branches clawing at the sky. Snow was falling harder now, thick and fast, the kind that piled up in drifts and erased the driveway by morning. He'd have to clear the path before Mason woke up, maybe get the snowblower out if it got bad enough. Ethan turned back toward the table, picking up his tools to put them away for the night. It was nearly 11. Time to check the fireplace, lock up, and get some sleep. Tomorrow was Saturday, which meant pancakes, cartoons, and probably a request to build a snow fort if the weather cooperated. He was halfway across the workshop when he heard it. A sound. Faint at first, barely audible over the wind. Ethan paused, head tilted, listening. There it was again, louder, knocking. Someone was knocking on his front door. His pulse quickened. Nobody came up the mountain road at night, especially not in a storm. The nearest neighbor was 2 miles down the ridge, and the vacation rentals scattered through the forest were mostly empty this time of year. He glanced toward the hallway, where Mason's bedroom door remained closed. The boy was a heavy sleeper, thank God. The knocking came again, urgent now, desperate. Ethan crossed the living room in 4 long strides and flipped on the porch light. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, he could make out a shape, small, hunched against the wind. He unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. The cold hit him like a fist, and standing on his porch, shivering violently in the freezing wind, was a young woman wrapped in nothing but a towel. For a moment, Ethan couldn't process what he was seeing. Her hair was plastered to her head, covered in white foam, shampoo, he realized, and her bare feet were pink against the snow-dusted wood. She clutched the towel around herself with both hands, her teeth chattering so hard he could hear them clacking together. "I'm sorry," she gasped, her voice shaking. I'm so sorry. I didn't know where else to go. Jesus, Ethan breathed. Get inside, now. He stepped aside and she stumbled past him into the warmth of the cabin, leaving wet footprints on the hardwood. Ethan slammed the door shut against the wind and turned to face her. She was maybe late 20s, with dark hair, though it was hard to tell under all that shampoo, and wide, panicked eyes. The towel was one of those cheap rental cabin ones, thin and barely large enough to cover her. She was shaking so hard she could barely stand. What happened? Ethan asked, already moving toward the hallway closet. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the shivering. The water cut out. I was in the shower and the water just stopped and I didn't have anything. I couldn't. It's okay, Ethan said, pulling a thick fleece blanket from the closet and draping it over her shoulders. Where are you staying? The A-frame, she managed. Down the road. Maybe half a mile? I saw your lights through the trees and I didn't know what else to do. I'm sorry. I know this is insane. Don't apologize, Ethan said firmly. You did the right thing. You would have frozen out there. He glanced toward the bathroom. Go warm up. There's a shower in there. Take your time. I'll find you some clothes. She stared at him for a moment, as if trying to determine whether he was real or some kind of mountain hallucination. Then she nodded shakily and disappeared into the bathroom. A moment later, he heard the water running. Ethan stood in the living room, his heart still pounding, half a mile in a towel. In a blizzard. She was lucky to be alive. He moved quickly, pulling together a makeshift outfit from his own closet, sweatpants, a flannel shirt, thick socks. Everything would be too big, but it was better than a towel. He knocked softly on the bathroom door and left the clothes on the floor outside, then retreated to the kitchen to put on a pot of coffee. The storm hammered against the windows. Outside, the world had disappeared into a wall of white. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process what had just happened. A stranger, on his porch, in the middle of the night. Under normal circumstances, he might have been more cautious, might have asked more questions before letting someone into his home. But there was nothing normal about a woman showing up hypothermic in a towel. You didn't think, you acted. The bathroom door opened. She emerged a few minutes later, swimming in his clothes. The sweatpants were rolled up at the ankles and the flannel hung off her shoulders like a tent, but she looked human again. Her hair was still damp, combed back from her face, and the color had returned to her cheeks. Thank you, she said quietly. I don't even know your name. Ethan, he said, handing her a mug of coffee. Ethan Carter. Lena, she replied, wrapping both hands around the mug like it was a lifeline. Lena Morales. She took a sip and closed her eyes. God, that's good. Sit, Ethan said, gesturing toward the couch. You need to warm up properly. She sank onto the cushions, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled in the hearth, the wind screamed outside. I can't believe I just did that, Lena said finally, shaking her head. Showed up at a stranger's house in a towel. My mother would be horrified. Your mother would understand, Ethan said. You didn't have a choice. I feel like an idiot, she muttered. I was in the shower and the water just cut off. No warning. 1 second it was fine, the next it was just nothing. I looked for the shut-off valve, but I couldn't find it, and I didn't have my phone because I left it charging in the bedroom, and I didn't have clothes because I'd already stripped down. She laughed, a sharp, slightly hysterical sound. So I grabbed a towel and ran. Smartest decision of my life. You made it here, Ethan said. That's what matters. Lena looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. You didn't even hesitate, she said softly. You just let me in. What was I supposed to do? Leave you on the porch? Some people would have. Ethan shrugged. I'm not some people. She smiled faintly and took another sip of coffee. I'm staying at the A-frame for a work project. I'm an architectural designer, freelance. I rented the cabin for 2 weeks so I could finish a proposal without distractions. She gestured toward the window. Clearly that's going well. What kind of proposal? Sustainable housing development, Lena said. Small scale, community focused. It's for a nonprofit in Boulder. If they approve the design, it could turn into something big. But the deadline's in 3 days and I'm behind, and now my shower's broken and I'm wearing a stranger's sweatpants. She laughed again, softer this time. Sorry, I'm rambling. You've had a rough night, Ethan said. Rambling's allowed. Lena set down her mug and pulled the blanket tighter. Do you live here alone? No, Ethan said. My son's asleep in the other room, Mason. He's 6. Oh. Lena's eyes widened slightly. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's fine, Ethan said. He sleeps through everything. You could set off fireworks in here and he wouldn't wake up. Lena smiled. That's a useful skill. It is, Ethan agreed. His mom's not in the picture, it's just the two of us. He didn't elaborate, and Lena didn't push. There was an understanding in her eyes, a recognition that some stories didn't need to be told right away. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm. I should probably try to get back, Lena said eventually, though she didn't move. Figure out what's wrong with the water. Not tonight, Ethan said firmly. It's a whiteout out there. You wouldn't make it 50 feet. I can't just stay here. You can and you will, Ethan said. I've got a guest room. It's not much, but it's warm and the door locks. You'll be safe. In the morning, when the storm clears, we'll go check on your cabin. Lena hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay. Thank you, really. Don't mention it. Ethan showed her to the guest room, a small space with a twin bed and a window that looked out over the forest. He'd been using it for storage mostly, boxes of old tools, a sewing machine that had belonged to his ex-wife, a stack of unread books. But the bed was made and the heater worked. Bathroom's across the hall, he said. If you need anything, just knock. I will, Lena said. Thank you, Ethan. I mean it. He nodded and pulled the door shut behind him. Back in the living room, Ethan stood by the window and stared out into the storm. The snow was falling so thick now that he couldn't see the trees. Somewhere out there, half a mile down the road, Lena's cabin sat dark and cold. Something about the situation didn't sit right. Water didn't just cut out for no reason. And if it had, there should have been a shut-off valve somewhere accessible. Rental properties were required to have them. It was code. Ethan made a mental note to check the cabin himself in the morning. If there was a problem, he'd fix it. That's what he did. He fixed things. He locked the front door, checked on Mason, still fast asleep, clutching his stuffed triceratops, and returned to the workshop to shut off the lights. The dining table sat in the center of the room, half finished, waiting. Ethan ran a hand along the edge of the wood, feeling the grain beneath his fingertips. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow he'd figure out what was going on. But tonight, a stranger slept in his guest room, and the storm raged on. Morning came cold and bright. Ethan woke to the sound of Mason's footsteps thundering down the hallway, followed by the inevitable question shouted at full volume. Dad, why is there a lady in the house? Ethan groaned and rolled out of bed, pulling on jeans and a sweater. He found Mason standing in the living room, staring wide-eyed at Lena, who was sitting on the couch with a mug of coffee and a sheepish expression. Good morning, she said. Mason, Ethan said, ruffling his son's hair. This is Lena. She had some trouble at her cabin last night, so she stayed here. Lena, this is Mason. Mason's eyes narrowed suspiciously. What kind of trouble? Her water broke, Ethan said. Lena choked on her coffee. I mean her water line, Ethan amended quickly, shooting Lena an apologetic look. The plumbing. It stopped working. Oh, Mason said, losing interest immediately. Can we have pancakes? Sure, bud, Ethan said. Go wash up. Mason bolted toward the bathroom. Sorry, Ethan said to Lena. He's direct. He's perfect, Lena said, grinning. And yes, I would also like pancakes. Ethan made breakfast while Lena sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her. She was already working, her fingers flying across the keyboard, eyes locked on the screen. Mason chattered nonstop about dinosaurs, snow forts, and whether or not Lena had ever seen a bear. Not up close, Lena said. Dad saw one once, Mason said proudly. He scared it away with a frying pan. That's not exactly how it happened, Ethan said, flipping a pancake. Did you hit it with the pan? Mason demanded. No. Did you throw the pan at it? No. Then what did you do? I yelled and waved the pan around until it left. Mason looked disappointed. That's boring. Lena laughed, and the sound filled the kitchen like sunlight. After breakfast, Ethan bundled up and headed outside to assess the storm damage. The snow had piled up in drifts nearly 3 feet high, and the driveway was completely buried. He fired up the snowblower and spent an hour clearing a path to the road, his breath fogging in the cold air. When he came back inside, Lena was pacing in front of the fireplace, her phone pressed to her ear. "I understand that," she was saying, her voice tight. "But I didn't cause the damage. The water just stopped." She paused, listening. $5,000? Her voice went up an octave. "Are you kidding me?" Ethan pulled off his gloves and moved closer, frowning. "No," Lena said. "No, I'm not paying that. I want someone to come out and inspect it first." Another pause. "Fine," she snapped. "Send someone. Today." She hung up and stood there for a moment, staring at her phone like it had personally betrayed her. "What's going on?" Ethan asked. Lena turned to face him, her expression caught somewhere between fury and panic. "The rental company," she said. "They're saying I damaged the plumbing system. They want $5,000 for repairs, or they're going to sue me." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. "That's insane. You didn't do anything." "I know," Lena said, "but they're saying the pipe burst because of misuse. They're claiming I caused it." "Did they even send anyone to look at it?" "No, they're sending an inspector this afternoon." She ran a hand through her hair, her frustration radiating off her in waves. "This is a nightmare. I don't have $5,000 lying around, and even if I did, I'm not paying for something I didn't break." Ethan crossed his arms, thinking. "Let me come with you," he said. "When the inspector gets there, I'll take a look at the system myself." Lena blinked. "You don't have to do that." "I know," Ethan said, "but something doesn't add up. Water doesn't just stop for no reason. And if the pipe burst, it's probably a mechanical failure, not user error." "You know about plumbing?" "I know about construction," Ethan said. "I've done enough renovations to spot a bad install when I see one." Lena hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Ethan said. "Let's go see what we're dealing with." They left Mason with a neighbor, a retired teacher named Ruth, who lived a mile down the ridge and loved babysitting, and drove toward the A-frame in Ethan's truck. The road had been plowed, but it was still treacherous, the snow packed into hard, slick ice beneath the tires. The cabin appeared through the trees, a small triangular structure with floor-to-ceiling windows and a steeply pitched roof. It looked charming in the daylight, the kind of place that belonged on a postcard. Ethan parked and they climbed out, their boots crunching in the snow. "Where's the main access?" Ethan asked. "Around back," Lena said, leading the way. The crawl space beneath the cabin was narrow and dark, accessible through a small wooden hatch. Ethan grabbed a flashlight from his truck and knelt down, peering inside. "Stay here," he said. "I'll check it out." He crawled into the space, the cold immediately seeping through his jeans. The ground was frozen solid, and the air smelled like damp earth and old wood. He swept the flashlight across the underside of the cabin, following the line of the pipes. It didn't take long to find the problem. One of the main water lines had burst clean through, the metal split open like a can of soda left in the freezer. Water had sprayed everywhere before freezing, coating the support beams in a layer of ice. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the installation itself. Whoever had put in the pipes had done a hack job. The connections were loose, the fittings mismatched, and one of the support pillars looked like it had been barely secured in the first place. The whole system was a disaster waiting to happen. Ethan swore under his breath. He crawled deeper, inspecting the damage. The burst pipe wasn't Lena's fault. It was the result of shoddy workmanship and a system that had been installed wrong from the start. The pressure had built up over time, and the cold snap had been the final straw. He shut off the main valve, stopping the flow of water, and wedged a spare piece of wood beneath the weakened support pillar to keep it from collapsing entirely. It wasn't a permanent fix, but it would hold for now. When he crawled back out, Lena was waiting, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. "Well?" she asked. "It's not your fault," Ethan said, brushing dirt off his jeans. "The pipe burst because it was installed wrong. The whole system's a mess. Whoever built this place cut corners." Lena's expression shifted from worry to anger. "So they're trying to blame me for their screw-up?" "Looks like it," Ethan said grimly. A car pulled into the driveway, a white sedan with a magnetic sign on the door that read, "Mountain Property Management." A man in a puffy jacket and a clipboard climbed out, his expression already set in a scowl. "Ms. Morales?" he called. "That's me," Lena said, stepping forward. The man glanced at Ethan, then back at Lena. "I'm here to assess the damage. You'll need to vacate the premises while I conduct my inspection." "Actually," Ethan said, stepping beside Lena, "I just finished inspecting it myself." The man's scowl deepened. "And who are you?" "Ethan Carter. I'm a contractor." It wasn't entirely true. He wasn't licensed, but it was close enough. "The pipe burst because of improper installation. The fittings are loose, and the support structure is compromised. This isn't user damage. It's a code violation." The inspector's face went red. "That's not—" "I can show you," Ethan said calmly. "Crawl space is open. Take a look yourself." The man hesitated, his clipboard trembling slightly in his hands. Lena stepped forward, her voice steady now. "I'm not paying for something I didn't break. If you want to push this, I'll file a complaint with the county inspector's office. I'm sure they'd love to hear about the code violations." The inspector stared at her for a long moment. Then he lowered his clipboard. "I'll need to consult with management," he muttered. "You do that," Lena said. The man climbed back into his car and drove off without another word. Lena turned to Ethan, her eyes bright with something fierce and grateful. "Thank you," she said. Ethan smiled. "Told you. Something didn't add up." And as they stood there in the snow, the cabin silent behind them, Ethan realized that this story was far from over. The drive back to Ethan's cabin was quiet, but it wasn't the uncomfortable kind of silence. Lena sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the snow-covered trees, her fingers drumming absently against her knee. Every few seconds, she'd shake her head slightly, as if she still couldn't quite believe what had just happened. "I can't believe he just left," she said finally. "He didn't even argue." "He knew he didn't have a leg to stand on," Ethan said, keeping his eyes on the icy road. "Once you threatened the county inspector, he realized this could blow back on the company. Bad installations, code violations, that's lawsuit territory. He's not going to push it." "But they'll still try to blame me, won't they?" Lena's voice had an edge to it now. "They'll find some other way to make this my problem." Ethan glanced over at her. "Maybe. But you've got evidence now. I can write up what I found, take photos of the crawl space. If they come after you again, you'll have documentation." Lena let out a long breath. "You didn't have to do that. Any of it." "I know," Ethan said simply. She looked at him for a moment, something shifting in her expression. "Most people would have just let me deal with it on my own." "Most people aren't up here," Ethan said. "Mountain living kind of requires looking out for each other. There's not exactly a lot of backup when things go wrong." Lena smiled faintly. "That's a nice way of saying everyone else would have told me it wasn't their problem." "Yeah," Ethan admitted. "Probably." When they pulled into the driveway, Ruth was standing on the porch with Mason, who was wearing his snow boots and dragging a plastic sled behind him. "Dad!" Mason shouted, waving frantically. "Ruth said I could go sledding, but only if you said yes." Ethan climbed out of the truck. "Did you finish your chores?" "Yes." "Did you actually finish them, or did you shove everything under your bed again?" Mason's face went pink. "I finished them." Ruth laughed, a warm, raspy sound. "He did. I checked. The boy's telling the truth for once." "All right," Ethan said. "You can go sledding, but stay on the hill behind the house, nowhere near the road." Mason let out a whoop and took off running, the sled bouncing behind him. Ruth turned her attention to Lena, her sharp eyes taking in everything with the kind of scrutiny only a retired teacher could manage. "So you're the one who showed up in a towel last night?" Lena's eyes widened. "Word travels fast." "Honey, word up here doesn't travel. It sprints." Ruth grinned. "Don't worry, I'm not judging. I once had to flag down a snowplow in my bathrobe because a bear got into my trash. We all have our moments." Lena laughed, and some of the tension in her shoulders finally released. Ruth headed home, and Ethan and Lena went inside. The cabin felt warmer now, the fire still crackling in the hearth from that morning. Lena set her bag down on the couch and rubbed her hands together. "I should probably get back to work," she said. "I lost a whole day yesterday dealing with this mess." "You're still on deadline?" Ethan asked. 3 days, Lena said, "and I'm nowhere near finished." "You can work here if you want," Ethan offered. "It's quiet. Mason will be outside for a while, and I've got projects in the workshop. You won't be in the way. Lena hesitated. Are you sure? I don't want to impose. You're not imposing, Ethan said. Besides, your cabin doesn't have heat right now. You'd freeze. She smiled. Okay, thank you. Lena sat up at the kitchen table, spreading out her laptop, sketchbooks, and a stack of reference materials. Within minutes, she was deep in her work, her focus absolute. Ethan watched her for a moment, the way her brow furrowed when she was thinking, the way she tapped her pen against her lips. And then he headed out to the workshop. The dining table was waiting for him, and he lost himself in the rhythm of the work. Sand, wipe, inspect, repeat. The wood was responding beautifully, the grain coming alive under his hands. He could already imagine it in the Hendersons' dining room, surrounded by family, holding the weight of shared meals and quiet conversations. An hour passed, then 2. He was applying the first coat of oil when he heard footsteps behind him. Can I ask you something? Lena's voice came from the doorway. Ethan looked up. She was leaning against the frame, her arms crossed, her expression curious. Sure, he said, setting down the rag. Why do you live up here? She asked. It's beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it's isolated. No neighbors for miles, no shops, no restaurants, just trees and snow and silence. What made you choose this? Ethan wiped his hands on his jeans, considering the question. It wasn't one he got asked often. Most people up here didn't need to ask, they already understood. I used to live in Denver, he said. I worked in corporate finance, long hours, high stress, the whole package. My ex-wife and I had Mason, and for a while everything seemed fine, but it wasn't. She wanted the city life, the career, the social scene, the upward mobility. I wanted something quieter. We fought about it constantly. Eventually she decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore, or a wife. She signed away custody, filed for divorce, and moved to Seattle. Haven't heard from her since. Lena's expression softened. I'm sorry. Ethan shrugged. It was hard, but it also made things clear. I didn't want to raise Mason in that world, the one where success is measured in promotions and square footage. I wanted him to grow up somewhere real. So I found this place, learned how to build things, and started over. Do you ever miss it? Lena asked. The city? Sometimes, Ethan admitted. I miss good coffee and Thai food and being able to run to the store without planning a 40-minute round trip. But mostly? No. This is better, slower, honest. Lena nodded slowly. I get that. I grew up in Phoenix, and I spent most of my 20s chasing work in LA and San Francisco. Big firms, big projects, big egos. It was exhausting. That's why I went freelance. I wanted to choose my own projects, work with people who actually cared about what they were building. She smiled faintly. Though I didn't expect to end up in the mountains with a busted pipe and a near hypothermia story. Ethan grinned. Life's funny that way. Yeah, Lena said, it is. She lingered for a moment longer, then returned to her work. By late afternoon, the sky had turned a deep, bruised purple, and the temperature was dropping fast. Ethan called Mason inside and started dinner, spaghetti with marinara, garlic bread, and a salad that Mason eyed with deep suspicion. Do I have to eat the green stuff? Mason asked. Yes, Ethan said. But why? Because vegetables exist, and ignoring them won't make them go away. Mason sighed dramatically, but ate the salad, one tiny piece at a time, as if each bite required immense courage. Lena joined them at the table, and the conversation flowed easily. Mason told her about the snow fort he was planning to build, which apparently required at least 100 snowballs for defense. Lena told him about a project she'd worked on in Santa Fe, designing a community center that looked like a giant adobe castle. Did it have a moat? Mason asked, eyes wide. No, Lena said, but it had a rooftop garden. Mason considered this. That's almost as cool. After dinner, Ethan built up the fire while Mason sprawled on the floor with his dinosaur toys. Lena settled onto the couch with her laptop, reviewing her designs. The cabin was warm and full of quiet life, the kind of peace that only comes when people stop performing and just exist together. Ethan was washing the dishes when his phone buzzed. He dried his hands and checked the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. Miss Morales is in violation of her rental agreement. If damages are not settled within 48 hours, legal action will be pursued. Mountain Property Management. Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced toward the living room where Lena was still working, oblivious. He walked over and handed her the phone. Lena read the message, her face going pale. "They're not going to let this go." "No," Ethan said. "They're not." "What do I do?" Her voice was steady, but he could see the fear underneath. "I don't have the money for a lawyer, and even if I did, I can't afford to waste time fighting this. I need to finish my proposal." Ethan sat down beside her. "Then we make sure they don't have a case. Tomorrow I'll go back to the cabin and document everything. Photos, measurements, written notes. I'll put together a full report showing the installation was faulty. If they try to take you to court, you'll have proof that this wasn't your fault." Lena looked at him, her eyes bright with something that might have been gratitude or disbelief. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Ethan said simply. "Most people wouldn't." "I'm not most people." She smiled, a real smile this time, and some of the fear in her eyes faded. That night, after Mason had gone to bed and Lena had retreated to the guest room, Ethan sat by the fire with a notebook and started sketching out a plan. He wasn't a licensed inspector, but he knew construction. He knew how to read a system, how to spot a bad install, how to document failures. If the property management company wanted a fight, he'd give them one. But as he sat there, staring into the flames, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was about more than just a busted pipe. Something about the whole situation felt off, rushed, aggressive, desperate. Why were they pushing so hard for a settlement? Why weren't they willing to send a proper inspector? He didn't have answers yet, but he was going to find them. The next morning, Ethan woke early and drove back to the A-frame alone. The sky was overcast, the air thick with the promise of more snow. He parked in the driveway and walked around to the back of the cabin, ducking into the crawl space with his flashlight and camera. He spent 2 hours down there documenting everything. The burst pipe, the loose fittings, the compromised support pillar. He took close-up shots of the connections, wide shots of the overall system, and detailed notes on every code violation he could identify. The installation was a disaster. Whoever had done the work had either been incompetent or in a hurry, and the result was a system that had been doomed from the start. When he finally crawled back out, his jeans were filthy and his hands were numb from the cold. But he had what he needed. He was loading his tools into the truck when he heard tires crunching on the gravel. A black SUV pulled into the driveway, and a woman in a sharp gray suit stepped out. She was maybe 50, with short silver hair and the kind of expression that suggested she didn't tolerate nonsense. "Can I help you?" Ethan asked. "I'm looking for Lena Morales," the woman said. "Is she here?" "No," Ethan said. "Who's asking?" The woman handed him a business card. "Karen Trask, Director of Operations, Mountain Property Management." "I'm here to discuss the damages to this property," she said. "Miss Morales has been unresponsive to our communications." She's responded," Ethan said. "She told you she didn't cause the damage." Karen's smile was thin. "And you are?" "Ethan Carter. I'm the one who inspected the crawl space. The pipe burst because of faulty installation, not user error. The whole system's a code violation." Karen's expression didn't change. "That's a serious accusation." "It's a fact," Ethan said. "I've got photos, documentation. If you want, I can walk you through it right now." For a moment, Karen just stared at him, her eyes calculating. Then she glanced toward the cabin, then back at Ethan. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said smoothly. "We're not trying to blame Ms. Morales. We're simply trying to recover costs for necessary repairs." "Repairs that were necessary because your contractor did a bad job," Ethan said. Karen's smile tightened. "If Ms. Morales believes the installation was faulty, she's welcome to file a formal complaint. But until then, she's responsible for damages incurred during her rental period." "That's not how this works," Ethan said. "You can't charge someone for pre-existing problems." "We'll let the courts decide," Karen said pleasantly. She turned to leave, then paused. "You should advise Miss Morales to settle. Legal battles are expensive and time-consuming. I'd hate to see her waste resources on something so preventable." She climbed back into the SUV and drove off, leaving Ethan standing in the driveway with his fists clenched. When he got back to the cabin, Lena was pacing in the living room, her phone pressed to her ear. I understand that, she was saying, her voice strained, but I didn't agree to that clause. She paused, listening, her face growing paler. That's not legal, she said. You can't just... Another pause. Fine, she snapped. I'll get a lawyer. She hung up and stood there, trembling. What happened? Ethan asked. Lena turned to face him, her eyes bright with tears she was clearly fighting to hold back. They're threatening to put a lien on my bank account. They're saying I violated the rental agreement by allowing unauthorized repairs, meaning you going into the crawl space. They're claiming I'm liable for the full cost of rebuilding the plumbing system. Her voice cracked. $20,000. Ethan felt his blood turn to ice. They can't do that. They're doing it, Lena said. They sent me a copy of the rental agreement. There's a clause buried in the fine print that says any repairs have to be authorized by the management company. Since you inspected the system without their permission, they're claiming I breached the contract. That's insane, Ethan said. You didn't hire me to do repairs, I was just looking. Doesn't matter, Lena said bitterly. The clause is vague enough that they can twist it however they want. And if I fight it, I'll have to hire a lawyer, which I can't afford. And even if I could, it would take months and I'd miss my deadline. And she broke off, pressing her hands to her face. I'm screwed. I'm completely screwed. Ethan crossed the room and put a hand on her shoulder. Hey, look at me. Lena lowered her hands, her eyes red. We're not done yet, Ethan said, but they're trying to intimidate you into settling. But that clause won't hold up in court. It's predatory. And if they try to enforce it, we'll file a counterclaim for the code violations. I'll testify. I'll bring the photos. We'll bury them. Lena shook her head. I don't have time for this. My proposal is due in 2 days. If I don't submit it, I lose the contract. And if I lose the contract, I lose my biggest client. This project is everything, Ethan. It's my whole year. Then finish it, Ethan said. Let me handle the property company. You can't. I can, Ethan said firmly. You focus on your work. I'll deal with them. Lena stared at him for a long moment, her expression caught between disbelief and desperation. Why are you doing this? Because they're bullies, Ethan said. And I don't like bullies. She let out a shaky laugh. You're crazy. Probably, Ethan agreed. But I'm also right. Lena nodded slowly, then wiped her eyes. Okay. I'll finish the proposal. You do whatever you're going to do. Just don't get yourself in trouble. No promises, Ethan said. That afternoon, while Lena worked at the kitchen table, Ethan made a series of phone calls. First, he called a friend from his Denver days, a guy named Marcus who'd gone to law school and now practiced construction law. Marcus listened to the situation, asked a few pointed questions, and then started laughing. They're bluffing, Marcus said. That clause is unenforceable. No judge would uphold it. Tell your friend to ignore the threats and let them take her to court. They won't. You're sure? Ethan asked. Positive, Marcus said. They're banking on her being too scared or too broke to fight back. But if she calls their bluff, they'll fold. Trust me. Ethan thanked him and hung up, feeling the tension in his chest ease slightly. Next, he called the county inspector's office and filed a formal complaint about the A-Frame's plumbing system. The woman on the phone took down all the details, asked for photos, and promised to send someone out within the week. By the time he finished, it was nearly dinner time. Lena was still working, her focus unbroken, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Mason was building an elaborate Lego spaceship on the floor, narrating the entire construction process to himself in a series of sound effects. Ethan made chili for dinner, and they ate together in comfortable silence. Afterward, Lena returned to her work, and Ethan helped Mason with his bath and bedtime routine. Is Lena going to stay forever? Mason asked as Ethan tucked him in. No, bud, Ethan said, just until she finishes her project. I like her, Mason said. She's nice, and she knows about dinosaurs. She does seem to know her stuff, Ethan agreed. Mason yawned. Dad? Yeah? Do you like her? Ethan paused, caught off guard. She's a good person. That's not what I asked, Mason said, far too perceptive for a 6-year-old. Ethan ruffled his hair. Get some sleep. You didn't answer. Good night, Mason. Good night, Dad. Ethan turned off the light and pulled the door closed, his son's question still echoing in his mind. Later that night, he found Lena sitting by the fire, her laptop balanced on her knees. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but there was determination in the set of her jaw. "How's it going?" Ethan asked, sitting down beside her. "I'm almost there," Lena said. "Another day and I'll have the full proposal ready. It's going to be tight, but I think I can make it." "You will," Ethan said. Lena glanced at him. "Did you talk to the property company?" "I talked to a lawyer friend," Ethan said. "He says their clause is unenforceable. They're bluffing. If they try to take you to court, they'll lose." Lena let out a breath she'd clearly been holding. "Really?" "Really," Ethan said. "And I filed a complaint with the county. They're sending an inspector out next week. Once they see the code violations, the property company will have bigger problems than chasing you for money." Lena closed her laptop and set it aside. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," Ethan said. "Yes, I do," Lena said quietly. "You didn't have to help me, any of this, but you did. And She broke off, her voice catching. "I haven't had someone in my corner like this in a long time." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. So he just sat there, the fire crackling between them, and let the silence speak for itself. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and steady, covering the world in white. The morning arrived with a silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Ethan woke to find frost etched across the windows in delicate patterns, the kind of cold that made the wood floors creak underfoot. He padded into the kitchen and started coffee, the familiar ritual grounding him as sunlight began to spill over the ridge. Lena was already awake, sitting at the table with her laptop open, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. She had that look people get when they've been working for hours without realizing it, eyes sharp but distant, fingers moving automatically across the keyboard. "Did you sleep at all?" Ethan asked, pouring her a cup of coffee. "A little," Lena said without looking up. "Couple hours maybe. I'm in the zone now. Can't stop." Ethan set the mug beside her. "You need to eat something." "Later," she murmured, her eyes scanning lines of text on the screen. He didn't push. He knew that kind of focus, the way a project could consume you until nothing else existed. Instead, he made scrambled eggs and toast, left a plate within her reach, and went to wake Mason. His son was sprawled diagonally across the bed, one arm flung over his stuffed triceratops, snoring softly. Ethan sat on the edge of the mattress and gently shook his shoulder. "Hey, bud. Time to get up." Mason groaned and rolled over, burying his face in the pillow. "5 more minutes." "You said that yesterday and it turned into 20. "That's because I'm very tired and growing takes energy." Ethan smiled. "Where'd you hear that?" "Ruth told me. She said growing boys need extra sleep and extra pancakes." "Ruth's a bad influence," Ethan said. "Come on, breakfast is ready." Mason finally dragged himself out of bed, shuffling into the kitchen in his dinosaur pajamas. He climbed onto a chair and started eating, glancing over at Lena every few seconds with open curiosity. "Is she still working?" he whispered to Ethan. "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "Big deadline." "What's a deadline?" "It's when you have to finish something by a certain time or bad things happen." Mason's eyes widened. "What kind of bad things?" "Nothing scary," Ethan said quickly. "Just, she might not get the job she wants." Mason nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. Then he picked up his fork and started eating with exaggerated quietness, clearly determined not to disturb Lena's important work. The day unfolded slowly. Ethan busied himself with small repairs around the cabin, fixing the guest room closet door that had been hanging crooked for months, tightening loose screws on the porch railing, organizing his workshop. Mason played outside in the snow, building what he claimed was a fortress of ultimate defense, but looked more like a lopsided pile of snowballs. Every hour or so, Ethan would check on Lena. She barely moved from her spot at the table, her focus absolute. At one point, he noticed she'd finished the eggs without seeming to realize she'd eaten them. At another, he refilled her coffee and she muttered thanks without looking up. It was almost noon when his phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Ethan stepped into the workshop and answered. "Mr. Carter?" A woman's voice, clipped and professional. "Speaking." "This is Jennifer Moss from the County Building Inspection Office. I understand you filed a complaint regarding a property on Ridgeline Road." "That's right," Ethan said. "The A-frame cabin. The plumbing system's installed wrong. Code violations across the board. There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. I've reviewed your complaint and the photos you submitted. I'm scheduled to conduct an inspection tomorrow morning at 9. Will you be available to walk me through your findings? Absolutely, Ethan said. Good. I'll need the property owner or manager present as well. Have they been notified? The management company has, Ethan said. They're aware there's an issue. I see. Another pause. Mr. Carter, I should mention, your documentation is quite thorough. If the violations are as extensive as you've indicated, this could result in significant penalties for the property owner. Good, Ethan said flatly. They've been trying to blame the tenant for their mistakes. Well, that ends tomorrow, Jennifer said. I'll see you at 9. She hung up, and Ethan stood there for a moment, feeling a grim satisfaction settle in his chest. The property company had tried to intimidate Lena into paying for damage she didn't cause. Now they were about to discover that bullying the wrong person came with consequences. He returned to the kitchen and found Lena stretching her arms overhead, her face tight with exhaustion. I need a break, she said. My brain's turning to mush. County inspector's coming tomorrow, Ethan said. 9 in the morning. She wants me there to walk her through the violations. Lena's expression shifted, hope flickering across her features. Really? Really, Ethan said. This time tomorrow, the property company's going to have much bigger problems than trying to shake you down for money. Lena let out a shaky laugh. I almost can't believe this is happening. A week ago, I was just trying to finish a proposal in peace. Now I'm in the middle of some kind of construction scandal. Welcome to mountain living, Ethan said. It's quieter than the city, but when things go wrong, they go very wrong. Apparently, Lena said. She stood and walked to the window, staring out at the snow-covered forest. You know what's strange? I came up here to be alone, to focus, to avoid distractions, and instead I ended up… She trailed off, shaking her head. Ended up what? Ethan asked. Lena turned to face him, something vulnerable in her expression. I ended up finding someone who actually gives a damn. That's rarer than you'd think. Before Ethan could respond, Mason burst through the front door in a flurry of snow and excitement. Dad, come look at my fortress. It has 3 walls and a tower. I'll be right there, Ethan said. Mason ran back outside, leaving the door wide open. Lena smiled. He's a good kid. He is, Ethan agreed, even when he's tracking snow through the house. Do you ever worry? Lena asked quietly. About raising him alone? Ethan considered the question. Every day, but worrying doesn't change anything. I just try to show up and do my best. Some days that's enough, some days it's not. But he's happy and he's safe, and he knows he's loved. That's all I can control. Lena nodded slowly. That's more than a lot of kids get. Yeah, Ethan said. It is. They stood there for a moment, the silence comfortable, and then Lena returned to her work, and Ethan went outside to inspect Mason's fortress. That evening, they fell into a rhythm that was starting to feel almost normal. Ethan cooked dinner, chicken stir-fry with vegetables that Mason picked around like they were tiny landmines, while Lena set the table and asked Mason about his day. Mason, delighted to have an audience, launched into a detailed explanation of his fortress's defensive capabilities, complete with sound effects. And then if the bad guys try to climb over the wall, I drop snowballs on their heads, he said, demonstrating with enthusiastic arm movements. Boom, boom, boom. Sounds like a solid strategy, Lena said seriously. What about a rear entrance, in case you need to escape? Mason's eyes widened. I didn't think of that. Every good fortress needs an escape route, Lena said. You never know when you might need a tactical retreat. What's tactical mean? It means smart, Ethan said. And she's right. You should add a back door tomorrow. Mason nodded, already planning modifications in his head. After dinner, Mason insisted on showing Lena his dinosaur collection, which meant dumping an entire bin of plastic figures onto the living room floor and providing detailed biographical information about each one. This one's a brachiosaurus, he said, holding up a long-necked figure. It ate plants and was really tall, taller than our house. And this one's a stegosaurus. It had plates on its back for temperature control, not for fighting. A lot of people think they were weapons, but they weren't. I did not know that, Lena said, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside him. Most people don't, Mason said matter-of-factly. "That's why I have to educate them." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, watching them. There was something about the scene, Lena listening with genuine interest, Mason gesturing wildly as he explained the difference between herbivores and carnivores. That made Ethan's chest tighten. It had been just him and Mason for so long that he'd forgotten what it looked like to have someone else in the mix. Someone who didn't just tolerate his son's endless enthusiasm, but actually enjoyed it. Eventually, Mason started yawning between dinosaur facts, and Ethan herded him toward the bathroom for teeth brushing and pajamas. "Can Lena read me a story?" Mason asked as Ethan tucked him in. "She's working, bud." "But she took a break for dinner." "That's different." Mason's face fell and Ethan was about to suggest reading 2 stories himself when Lena appeared in the doorway. "I heard someone needs a story," she said. Mason's face lit up. "Yes!" Lena sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the book Mason handed her, a well-worn copy of a story about a mouse who wanted to be a knight. She read with expression, doing different voices for each character, and Mason listened with rapt attention. Ethan watched from the hallway, something shifting inside him. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was something deeper, more complicated, something that scared him a little. When Lena finished the story, Mason was already half asleep, his eyes drooping. "Thanks, Lena," he mumbled. "Any time," she said softly. She turned off the lamp and followed Ethan back into the living room. They stood there for a moment, the cabin quiet except for the crackle of the fire. "You didn't have to do that," Ethan said. "I wanted to," Lena said. "He's a sweet kid, and honestly it was nice. Reminded me of when my nephew was that age, before he decided he was too cool for bedtime stories." "How old is he now?" 14, Lena said, "and deeply embarrassed by everything I do." Ethan smiled. "That's the age." Lena sat down on the couch, curling her legs beneath her. "I should get back to work. I'm so close to finishing. Maybe another 3 hours and I'll have the full proposal ready to submit." "You've been at it all day," Ethan said. "You should rest." "I can rest after I submit," Lena said. "Right now I just need to push through." But she didn't move. She just sat there, staring into the fire, her shoulders sagging with exhaustion. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a moment. "Sure." "Why did you really help me?" Lena asked. "And don't say it's because it was the right thing to do. There's more to it than that." Ethan sat down in the chair across from her, considering his answer. "When my ex-wife left, I felt like I'd failed, like I'd somehow driven her away by not being enough. It took me a long time to realize that wasn't true. She made her choice, and it had nothing to do with my worth. But for a while I was angry. At her. At myself. At the whole situation." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Then I moved up here and started building things, fixing things. And I realized that's what I'm good at. Not corporate finance or climbing the ladder, just making things right. When I saw what the property company was trying to do to you, it felt like something I could actually fix. Something that mattered." Lena was quiet for a long moment. "You did fix it. You are fixing it." "We're not done yet," Ethan said. "No," Lena agreed, "but we're close." She stood, picked up her laptop, and returned to the table. Within minutes, she was lost in her work again, her focus absolute. Ethan stayed by the fire, watching the flames dance, and thought about what tomorrow would bring. The next morning arrived gray and cold. Ethan was up before dawn, moving quietly through the cabin so as not to wake Mason or Lena. He made coffee, checked the weather forecast, more snow expected by afternoon, and reviewed the photos he'd taken of the A-frame's plumbing system. At 8:30, Lena emerged from the guest room, looking surprisingly refreshed. "I finished," she said, a tired smile on her face. "Submitted the proposal at 4 in the morning. It's done." "How do you feel?" Ethan asked. "Terrified," Lena admitted, "and relieved and exhausted, but mostly terrified." "They're going to love it," Ethan said. "You haven't even seen it." "I've seen you work," Ethan said. "That's enough." Lena smiled, and some of the tension in her shoulders eased. Ruth arrived at 8:45 to watch Mason, who was still asleep and would likely remain so until at least 9:30. Ethan and Lena climbed into his truck and headed toward the A-frame, the road slick with ice beneath fresh powder. When they arrived, a white sedan was already parked in the driveway. A woman in a practical winter coat and sturdy boots stood beside it, reviewing something on a tablet. "Miss Moss," Ethan said, climbing out of the truck. "Mr. Carter," she said, shaking his hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes sharp. "And you must be Miss Morales." "I am," Lena said. "Good. Let's take a look at this system." Ethan led her around to the back of the cabin and opened the crawl space hatch. Jennifer Moss didn't hesitate. She pulled on a headlamp and crawled inside, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Ethan followed, guiding her to the burst pipe and the compromised support pillar. She examined everything in silence, taking photos, making notes on her tablet, running her hands along the connections. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat and professional. "This is worse than I expected." "How bad?" Ethan asked. "The installation is completely substandard," Jennifer said. "Wrong fittings, improper pressure ratings, inadequate support structures. Whoever did this work either had no idea what they were doing or deliberately cut corners to save money. Either way, it's a serious violation." "What happens now?" Ethan asked. Jennifer crawled back toward the hatch. "Now I write a report, submit it to the county, and the property owner gets fined. They'll be required to bring the system up to code before they can rent this cabin again. And if they try to pass the cost on to a tenant, they'll be facing legal action." They emerged from the crawl space to find Lena standing in the driveway, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold. Behind her, Karen Trask's black SUV was pulling in. Karen stepped out, her expression carefully neutral. "Inspector Moss, I wasn't aware you'd be conducting the inspection personally." "Someone has to," Jennifer said coolly, "and given the severity of the complaint, I thought it best to handle this myself." "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding," Karen said smoothly. "The tenant likely caused the damage through—" "The tenant caused nothing," Jennifer interrupted. "The system was installed improperly from the start. Multiple code violations. The property owner is liable." Karen's composure slipped just for a moment. "That's impossible. We had the system inspected when the cabin was built." "Then your inspector missed it," Jennifer said, "or lied. Either way, you're looking at significant fines and a mandatory rebuild." "How significant?" Karen's voice was tight now. "I'll have the full report ready by end of week," Jennifer said. "But preliminary estimate? $15,000 to $20,000. And that's just the plumbing. I'll need to inspect the electrical and structural systems as well." Karen's face went pale. She turned to Lena, her eyes hard. "This is your fault. If you hadn't brought in some random contractor—" "That random contractor saved you from a lawsuit," Jennifer said sharply. "If Ms. Morales had been injured because of your faulty system, you'd be facing much worse than fines. You should be thanking her." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. For a long moment, she just stood there, clearly calculating her next move. Finally, she turned to Lena. "We'll be withdrawing our claim for damages." "Good," Lena said evenly. Karen climbed back into her SUV and drove off without another word. Jennifer Moss watched her go, then turned to Ethan and Lena. "I'll need written statements from both of you for my report, just documenting the timeline and your observations. Nothing complicated." "We can do that," Ethan said. Jennifer nodded. "Good work, Mr. Carter. You probably saved someone from getting seriously hurt." She glanced at Lena. "And Miss Morales, I'd suggest finding a different place to stay. This cabin's going to be under renovation for at least a month." "I think I've had enough of mountain rentals for a while," Lena said. Jennifer smiled faintly. "Can't say I blame you." She packed up her equipment and left, and Ethan and Lena stood alone in the driveway. "It's over," Lena said quietly. "It's actually over." "Yeah," Ethan said. "It is." Lena let out a long breath, and suddenly she was laughing, the sound bright and slightly hysterical. "I can't believe that just happened. I can't believe it worked." "Told you they were bluffing," Ethan said. Lena turned to him, her eyes bright. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how to—" "Don't," Ethan said. "You don't have to thank me." But Lena stepped forward and hugged him anyway, quick and fierce. Ethan froze for half a second, then wrapped his arms around her, feeling the tension drain out of her body. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed. "Sorry, I'm not usually a hugger." "It's okay," Ethan said. They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with something neither of them seemed ready to name. Then Lena cleared her throat and stepped back. I should probably pack up my stuff. Get out of your hair. You don't have to leave, Ethan said, the words coming out before he could stop them. Lena looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. What? The roads are going to get bad again this afternoon, Ethan said, scrambling for a reason that didn't sound desperate. You could stay another night, just until the weather clears. Lena hesitated, and for a moment Ethan thought she was going to say no. Then she smiled. Okay, one more night. And as they drove back toward the cabin, snow beginning to fall around them, Ethan realized he didn't want her to leave at all. The snow started falling harder as they drove back, fat flakes that stuck to the windshield faster than the wipers could clear them. Ethan kept his eyes on the road, but he was acutely aware of Lena sitting beside him, her hands folded in her lap, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. You okay? He asked. Yeah, Lena said softly. I'm just processing. A week ago, I thought my career was about to implode. Now the proposal's submitted. The property company's off my back, and I'm sitting in a truck with someone who fought my battles without expecting anything in return. She turned to look at him. That doesn't happen in my world. Maybe you've been in the wrong world, Ethan said. Lena laughed quietly. Maybe I have. When they pulled into the driveway, Ruth was sitting on the porch, bundled in a thick coat, a thermos of coffee in her hands. Mason was nearby, adding what appeared to be a moat to his snow fortress. How'd it go? Ruth called as they climbed out of the truck. Property company's backing off, Ethan said. County inspector documented everything. They're facing fines and a full rebuild. Ruth let out a satisfied sound. Good. Karen Trask's been running roughshod over renters for years. About time someone called her on it. You know her? Lena asked. Everyone knows everyone up here, Ruth said. And Karen's got a reputation. She buys up cabins cheap, does the bare minimum to make them rentable, then gouges people on fees when things go wrong. She tried to pull the same stunt on my nephew 2 years ago. Claimed he broke the water heater when it was installed in the 70s and barely functional. What happened? Lena asked. He paid, Ruth said grimly. Didn't have the time or money to fight it. Most people don't. That's how she gets away with it. Not this time, Ethan said. Ruth smiled. Not this time. She stood and handed the thermos to Ethan. I made soup. It's on the stove. And Mason's been fed, entertained, and has promised not to track snow into the house, though we all know that's a lie. Thanks, Ruth, Ethan said. Any time. Ruth headed toward her truck, then paused and looked back at Lena. You staying a while longer? Lena glanced at Ethan, then nodded. Just until the weather clears. Ruth's smile widened knowingly. Of course, the weather. She climbed into her truck and drove off, leaving Ethan feeling like he'd just been seen through completely. Mason ran over, his face flushed from the cold. Did you beat the bad guys? We did, Lena said. Did you have to fight them? Just with paperwork, Ethan said. Mason looked disappointed. That's not very exciting. Sometimes the boring fights are the important ones, Lena said. Mason considered this, then shrugged and ran back to his fortress. Inside, the cabin smelled like Ruth's vegetable soup, rich and warming. Ethan ladled out bowls while Lena sat at the table, her laptop open but untouched. She seemed distracted, her gaze drifting toward the window where snow continued to fall in thick curtains. What are you thinking about? Ethan asked, setting a bowl in front of her. My apartment in Denver, Lena said. I've been subletting it for the past month. The lease is up in 2 weeks, and I haven't decided if I want to renew. Where would you go? I don't know, Lena said. That's the problem. I've been freelancing for 3 years now, and I've never stayed anywhere longer than a few months. I go where the work is. Set up temporary offices and Airbnbs and coffee shops. It's flexible, but it's also... She trailed off, searching for the word. Lonely? Ethan offered. Yeah, Lena said. Lonely. She took a spoonful of soup, her expression distant. When I was working at big firms, I hated the politics and the egos. But at least there were people around, colleagues to have lunch with, office parties, structure. Now I have freedom, but most days it's just me and my laptop. I tell myself that's what I wanted, but I'm not sure anymore. Ethan sat down across from her. What would you do if you could do anything? If money and logistics weren't an issue? Lena thought about it. absently stirring her soup. I'd find a place I actually liked, somewhere I could set down roots, build a real office, not just a corner of someone else's living room. Take on projects that matter, not just whatever pays the bills. Work with people who care about what they're building. Sounds like you've thought about this, Ethan said. I have, Lena admitted. But thinking and doing are different things. It's scary, choosing a place, committing to it. What if I pick wrong? What if you pick right? Ethan countered. Lena looked at him, something vulnerable in her expression. Is that what you did? When you moved up here? I didn't feel like I had a choice, Ethan said. My marriage was over, Mason needed stability, and I needed to be somewhere I could breathe, so I came here. And yeah, it was scary. Leaving behind everything I knew, starting over in a place where I didn't know anyone. But it was also the best decision I ever made. Do you ever regret it? Lena asked. Not once, Ethan said. Even on the hard days? Lena nodded slowly, absorbing this. I got an email this morning from the nonprofit in Boulder. They want to meet next week to discuss the proposal. That's great, Ethan said. It is, Lena agreed. But it means I need to go back, face reality, figure out what comes next. You don't sound excited. I am, Lena said quickly. Then, more honestly, I think I am. It's just, this week has been strange, good strange, and I'm not ready for it to end. Before Ethan could respond, Mason burst through the door, tracking snow across the floor exactly as predicted. Dad, the moat's finished. Come see. Ethan sighed, boots off first. But it might collapse if I wait too long. It'll survive 30 seconds. Mason grudgingly kicked off his boots and ran back outside in his socks. Ethan followed, grabbing his coat, and Lena came too, pulling on the oversized flannel she'd borrowed days ago and hadn't returned. The fortress had indeed been upgraded. Mason had dug a shallow trench around the perimeter and filled it with snow packed so tightly it looked almost like ice. Impressive, Lena said, but what happens when it melts? Mason frowned, clearly not having considered this. I'll build a new one. Smart, Ethan said. Always have a backup plan. They stood there for a while, the three of them, watching Mason add finishing touches to his creation. The snow fell quietly around them, muffling the world into something soft and timeless. Ethan glanced at Lena and found her watching Mason with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between fondness and longing. That afternoon, while Mason napped and Lena caught up on emails, Ethan retreated to his workshop. The dining table was nearly finished, the wood glowing with a honey-colored sheen under the overhead lights. He ran his hand along the surface, feeling the smoothness beneath his fingertips, the satisfaction of a job done right. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to find Lena standing in the doorway. Can I come in? She asked. Of course. She walked over to the table, her eyes widening. Ethan, this is beautiful. It's coming along? He said modestly. No, I mean it. Lena ran her hand along the edge, mimicking his earlier gesture. This is craftsman-level work. You could sell pieces like this in galleries. I'm not that good, Ethan said. Yes, you are, Lena said firmly. You just don't see it because you're too close to it. But trust me, I work with materials and design every day. This is exceptional. Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. Thanks. Lena circled the table slowly, examining the joinery, the grain patterns, the careful attention to detail. How long have you been doing this? 4 years, Ethan said. Since I moved up here. I needed something to do with my hands, something that wasn't staring at spreadsheets. Do you take commissions? A few. Mostly locals, word of mouth. You should expand, Lena said. You could build a real business out of this. Ethan shrugged. I'm not interested in scaling up. This is enough. It pays the bills and keeps me busy. But don't you want more? Lena asked. More of what? More stress? More obligations? I left that life for a reason. Lena was quiet for a moment, her fingers still tracing the edge of the table. What if you could have more without the stress? What if you could grow this into something bigger, but still keep control of it? I don't know, Ethan admitted. I haven't thought about it. Maybe you should, Lena said. She pulled out her phone and took a photo of the table. Would you mind if I shared this with some people? What people? Architects, designers, people I know who appreciate quality work. You'd be surprised how hard it is to find craftsmen who actually care about what they're building. Ethan hesitated. The idea of exposing his work to strangers, to judgment, made him uncomfortable. But Lena was looking at him with such earnest enthusiasm that he found himself nodding. Okay, sure. Great, Lena said, already typing. I'm tagging you as Mountain Artisan. That okay? I guess. She smiled and slipped her phone back into her pocket. You know, you helped me this week. Let me help you back. You don't owe me anything, Ethan said. I know, Lena said, but I want to. That evening, they cooked dinner together. Pasta with marinara sauce, garlic bread, and a salad that Mason once again regarded with deep suspicion. The kitchen felt smaller with both of them moving through it, but it wasn't a bad kind of small. It was the kind where you had to navigate around each other, where a hand on a shoulder meant excuse me, and a brush of fingers reaching for the same utensil meant sorry, followed by a smile. Mason set the table without being asked, which was unusual enough that Ethan checked his forehead for fever. I'm fine, Dad, Mason said, rolling his eyes. I just want to be helpful. Who are you, and what have you done with my son? Mason giggled and ran off to wash his hands. Over dinner, the conversation flowed easily. Mason told them about a book Ruth had read to him about a bear who learned to ride a bicycle, which led to a discussion about whether bears could actually be trained to do tricks, which led to Ethan recounting the time he'd scared off a bear with a frying pan, much to Mason's delight. Tell the part about the noise it made, Mason demanded. It just sort of huffed and wandered off, Ethan said. That's not how you told it before. I've told it 100 times. The details get fuzzy. In my version, it roars and you roar back, Mason said. Your version's better, Lena said, grinning. After dinner, Mason wanted to watch a movie, so they settled onto the couch with blankets while some animated film about talking fish played on the TV. Mason sat between them, gradually listing sideways until his head was resting against Lena's shoulder. She glanced at Ethan, her expression soft, and he felt something in his chest tighten. When the movie ended, Mason was asleep. Ethan carried him to bed while Lena cleaned up the living room, folding blankets and turning off lights. When Ethan returned, he found her standing by the window, staring out at the snow. It's really coming down, she said. Ethan joined her at the window. The world outside was white and still, the trees heavy with snow, the darkness absolute beyond the porch light's reach. Road will be impassable by morning, he said. You're stuck here another day at least. Oh no, Lena said, but she was smiling. Whatever will I do? They stood there in comfortable silence, shoulders almost touching. Can I ask you something? Lena said after a while. Sure. Do you ever get lonely up here, just you and Mason? Ethan thought about it. Sometimes, but it's a different kind of lonely than I felt in Denver. There, I was surrounded by people and still felt isolated. Here, the isolation is physical, but it doesn't feel as heavy. Does that make sense? Yeah, Lena said quietly. It does. What about you? Ethan asked. You said freelancing's lonely. Is that why you're thinking about settling down somewhere? Partly, Lena said, but also, I'm tired of running. I've been chasing projects for so long, trying to prove I can make it on my own, that I forgot to ask myself what I actually want. And this week being here, I've realized that what I want is connection, community, people who actually see me. She turned to face him, her expression vulnerable. You see me, Ethan, and Mason sees me, and Ruth sees me. In 1 week, I felt more like myself than I have in years. That means something. Ethan's heart was pounding now, but he kept his voice steady. So what are you going to do about it? I don't know yet, Lena admitted, but I'm going to figure it out. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Ethan wanted to say something, wanted to tell her that she could stay, that she didn't have to figure it out alone, that this week had changed something for him too. But the words stuck in his throat, too big and too frightening to speak aloud. Instead, he said, You want some tea? Lena smiled as if she understood everything he wasn't saying. Yeah, tea sounds good. They sat by the fire until late, talking about nothing and everything. Lena told him about growing up in Phoenix, about her parents who'd immigrated from Mexico before she was born, about her younger brother who was now a teacher in Tucson. Ethan told her about his childhood in a small town in Nebraska, about his father who'd worked in construction, about the years he'd spent trying to become someone he wasn't before finally admitting defeat and starting over. "Do you think your ex-wife ever regrets it?" Lena asked. "Leaving?" "I don't know," Ethan said honestly. "We haven't spoken since the divorce was finalized, but I hope she found whatever she was looking for." "That's generous of you." "Not really," Ethan said. "I'm just grateful she didn't fight me for custody. Mason deserves better than being caught in the middle of our mess." Lena nodded. "He's lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Ethan said. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with them both. Lena retreated to the guest room and Ethan checked the locks, banked the fire, and stood for a moment in the quiet cabin. Tomorrow, the snow would stop. The roads would get plowed, and Lena would have to decide whether to leave or stay a little longer. But tonight, she was here, and that was enough. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of his phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. He grabbed it groggily and saw 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Before he could process this, the phone rang again. "Hello?" he answered, his voice rough with sleep. "Mr. Carter, this is Jennifer Moss from the County Building Inspection Office." Ethan sat up, suddenly alert. "Is everything okay?" "I need you to come back to the A-frame cabin," Jennifer said. "This morning, if possible. There's something you need to see." "What's wrong?" "Just come," Jennifer said, "and bring Miss Morales if she's available." She hung up before he could ask more questions. Ethan got dressed quickly and woke Lena, explaining the situation. 20 minutes later, they were in the truck, driving through snow-packed roads toward the A-frame. The sky was heavy and gray, promising more snow by afternoon. When they arrived, Jennifer's sedan was already there, along with another county vehicle and Karen Trask's black SUV. Ethan's stomach tightened. Jennifer met them at the driveway, her expression grim. "I need to show you something, and I need you to document it." She led them around to the back of the cabin where the crawl space hatch was open. But instead of crawling inside, she pointed to the ground nearby. There, half buried in snow, were pieces of broken pipe. New pieces, different from the ones that had burst. "What is this?" Ethan asked. "I came back this morning to take additional photos for my report," Jennifer said, "and I found these. Someone tried to replace the damaged pipes overnight, badly." Lena stared at the pipes. "Why would they do that?" "To cover up the original installation," Jennifer said. "If they replaced the faulty system before my final inspection, they could claim the damage was fixed and avoid the fines, but whoever did the work was either in a hurry or incompetent. They didn't even bother burying the old pipes properly." Karen Trask appeared from around the corner of the cabin, her face tight. "This is private property. You're trespassing." "I'm conducting an official inspection," Jennifer said coolly. "And you just made things significantly worse for yourself." I don't know what you're talking about," Karen said. Jennifer held up her phone, showing a photo. "Timestamp says 11:30 last night. Fresh tire tracks in the snow leading to this exact spot. And security footage from the neighbor's cabin shows a work truck with your company logo pulling in at 11:15. Karen's face went white. "You attempted to tamper with evidence during an active investigation," Jennifer continued. "That's not just a code violation anymore. That's fraud." "I was trying to fix the problem," Karen said, her voice rising. "You said the system needed to be rebuilt. I was rebuilding it." "After I'd already documented the violations," Jennifer said. "That's not fixing a problem. That's destroying evidence. And the new installation is just as bad as the old one. You've just added another layer of liability." Karen looked at Ethan, then at Lena, her expression desperate now. "This is your fault. If you just paid the settlement." "If I just let you bully me into paying for damage I didn't cause," Lena said, her voice steady and cold. "No, this is on you." Jennifer stepped between them. "Ms. Trask, you're going to need a lawyer, a good one, because I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for investigation. You're done." Karen stood there for a moment, her carefully constructed composure crumbling. Then she turned and walked back to her SUV without another word. Jennifer watched her drive off, then turned to Ethan and Lena. "I'm going to need full statements from both of you, and I'll need those photos you took, Mr. Carter. Everything. This just became a criminal case." Ethan nodded, still processing what had just happened. Lena reached for his hand and squeezed it. We did the right thing. Yeah, Ethan said. We did. As they drove back to the cabin, the snow started falling again, and Ethan realized that sometimes doing the right thing meant watching someone else's carefully built lies collapse under the weight of truth. And sometimes it meant finding someone worth fighting alongside. Part 5. The statement-taking process stretched across the entire afternoon. Jennifer Moss set up a makeshift office at the kitchen table in Ethan's cabin, her laptop open, a voice recorder running, methodically walking them through every detail from the moment Lena had knocked on the door in a towel to the discovery of the tampering that morning. Mason played quietly in his room, sensing the seriousness in the air even if he didn't understand its source. "Walk me through your initial inspection again," Jennifer said to Ethan, her fingers poised over the keyboard. "What specifically made you suspect the installation was faulty?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, calling up the memory. The fittings were mismatched. You had brass connections joined to copper pipes with the wrong type of solder. The pressure ratings didn't match the system requirements. And the support pillar looked like it had been set without proper anchoring. When I put pressure on it, it shifted. That should never happen. "And you documented all of this photographically?" "Every angle I could get," Ethan confirmed. "I'll send you the full set." Jennifer nodded, typing rapidly. "Miss Morales, when the property management company first contacted you about damages, what exactly did they say?" Lena pulled out her phone, scrolling through old messages. "The first call came the morning after the water cut out. A woman named Janet said there had been a pipe burst and that I was responsible for repairs estimated at $5,000. When I said I hadn't done anything to cause it, she said that didn't matter. The damage occurred during my rental period, so I was liable." "Did she mention sending an inspector?" "Not initially," Lena said. "That only came up after I refused to pay. Then suddenly they were sending someone out, but they were also escalating the amount. By the second call, they were talking about $20,000 and structural damage." Jennifer's expression darkened. "Classic intimidation tactic. Escalate the threat until the victim feels too overwhelmed to fight back." She made another note. "And the rental agreement, the clause they cited about unauthorized repairs. Do you still have that contract?" "Yes," Lena said, pulling it up on her laptop. "Here. Section 12, subsection 4. Tenant shall not engage in or authorize any repair, modification, or inspection of property systems without prior written consent from Mountain Property Management. It's buried in the middle of a paragraph about maintenance responsibilities." Jennifer read it, her jaw tightening. Predatory contract language. They bury these clauses in dense legal text, knowing most people won't read carefully. Then they use them as weapons when convenient. She looked up at Lena. "Did they provide written consent for any repairs?" "They didn't do any repairs," Lena said. "That's the whole point. The system was broken from the start." "Exactly," Jennifer said, "which means this clause is irrelevant. You can't be held responsible for pre-existing conditions, no matter what the contract says. But they were counting on you not knowing that." She closed her laptop and turned off the recorder. "Okay, I have what I need. I'll compile this into a formal report for the DA's office. Given the attempted evidence tampering, I expect they'll move forward with charges against both Karen Trask and Mountain Property Management as a corporate entity." "What happens to Lena?" Ethan asked. "Is she clear?" "Completely," Jennifer said. "She's a witness now, not a defendant. The company has no legal standing to pursue any claims against her. In fact, given the harassment and false accusations, she'd have grounds for a civil suit if she wanted to pursue it." Lena shook her head. "I just want this to be over." "It is," Jennifer assured her. "At least your part in it. The rest is between the county and Mountain Property Management." She gathered her things and stood. "You two did good work here. A lot of people would have just paid the money and moved on. By standing up to them, you've probably saved dozens of future renters from the same scam." After Jennifer left, the cabin felt strangely quiet. Ethan made coffee while Lena sat at the table, staring at nothing in particular. "You okay?" he asked, setting a mug in front of her. "Yeah," Lena said. "Just processing. A week ago, I was terrified I was going to lose everything. Now it's over, and I don't quite know what to do with myself." "You could celebrate," Ethan suggested. Lena smiled faintly. "With what? A dance party in the living room?" "I was thinking more along the lines of not worrying for 5 minutes." I don't know if I remember how to do that. Mason appeared in the doorway, dragging his triceratops. Is the bad stuff over? The bad stuff's over, Ethan confirmed. Good, Mason said. Can we have pizza for dinner? We never have pizza. We had pizza 2 weeks ago, Ethan said. That was 100 years ago in kid time. Lena laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I think pizza sounds perfect. So they ordered pizza from the one place in Pine Ridge that delivered to the Ridge, which took an hour and a half but arrived hot and greasy and exactly what they needed. They ate sitting on the floor around the coffee table, Mason telling elaborate stories about his dinosaurs, while cheese stretched between his fingers and his chin. This one's a velociraptor, Mason said, holding up a small figure. It hunted in packs and was actually really smart. Smarter than most people. Smarter than me? Lena asked. Mason considered this seriously. Probably about the same. You're both pretty smart. I'll take that as a compliment, Lena said. After dinner, Mason wanted to play a board game, so they settled in for an extended session of a strategy game involving knights and castles that somehow ended with Mason winning, despite Ethan's certainty that he'd been winning 5 minutes earlier. You let me win, Mason accused. I did not, Ethan protested. Dad always lets me win, Mason told Lena confidentially. I make strategic errors, Ethan corrected. There's a difference. Lena grinned. Sure there is. When Mason finally went to bed, after 3 stories, 2 glasses of water, and 1 extended negotiation about whether dinosaurs would realistically beat dragons in a fight, Ethan and Lena found themselves alone again, the cabin settling into its familiar nighttime quiet. They gravitated toward the fireplace without discussion, Lena curling up on one end of the couch, while Ethan added another log to the fire. I got a response to my proposal, Lena said after a while. Ethan turned to look at her. And? They love it, Lena said, but her voice was flat. They want to move forward. They're offering me a year-long contract to oversee the entire development. Good money, full creative control, everything I've been working toward. That's incredible, Ethan said. Why don't you sound happy? Lena pulled her knees up to her chest. Because it's in Boulder, which means I'd need to be there full time. For at least a year, probably longer if the project expands like they're hoping. That's what you wanted, isn't it? A big project, stability. I thought it was, Lena said quietly. But now I'm not sure. She looked at him, her expression vulnerable. I've been up here for a week, and it's been the best week I've had in years. Not just because the work got done, but because I felt like I was part of something, part of a community, part of... She trailed off, searching for words. Part of a family, Ethan finished. Yeah, Lena said, and I know that's crazy. It's been 7 days. You barely know me. I barely know you. But it doesn't feel that way. It feels like I've been here longer, like this is where I'm supposed to be. Ethan sat down on the couch beside her, his heart pounding. It doesn't feel crazy to me. Lena looked at him, hope and fear warring in her expression. What are you saying? I'm saying that this week changed things for me too, Ethan said. Mason and I have been on our own for 4 years. We've built a good life, a quiet life. But watching you work, listening to you talk about design and buildings and the future, it reminded me that there's more to life than just getting by. And having you here, seeing Mason light up when you're around, watching you fit into our routine like you've always been part of it. He took a breath. I don't want you to leave. Lena's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to leave either. But I can't just give up this opportunity. It's everything I've been working for. I'm not asking you to give it up, Ethan said. I'm asking you to consider that maybe there's a way to have both. Boulder's 2 hours away. That's commutable. You could work from here part of the week, drive down when you need to be on site. Or maybe there's a way to structure the project so you're not tied to Boulder full time. You really think that would work? Lena asked. I think if you want it to work, we can figure it out, Ethan said. Together. Lena wiped at her eyes, laughing shakily. This is insane. We've known each other for a week. Sometimes a week is enough, Ethan said. She looked at him for a long moment, then leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and tentative and felt like a question being answered. When she pulled back, she was smiling. Okay, she said. Let's figure it out. They stayed up late talking through possibilities. Lena could rent a small apartment in Boulder for the days she needed to be on site, but keep her main base here. She could propose a hybrid work structure to the nonprofit, arguing that being away from the city would actually give her better perspective on sustainable rural design. Ethan could potentially expand his woodworking business, taking on larger commissions, maybe even collaborating with Lena on custom furniture for the housing development. You could design the spaces, I could build the pieces to fill them, Ethan said. That could actually be something. Oh, it really could, Lena said, her excitement building. And it would give the development a cohesive feel. Local materials, local craftsmen, everything sourced from the community. You should pitch that, Ethan said. It fits with their sustainability mission. Lena pulled out her laptop and started typing notes, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Ethan watched her work, marveling at the transformation from uncertainty to focused determination. What? Lena asked, catching him staring. Nothing, Ethan said. Just, you're impressive when you get going. You haven't seen anything yet, Lena said, grinning. The next few days settled into a new rhythm. The roads cleared enough for Lena to drive down to Pine Ridge and retrieve her belongings from the A-frame. Ethan went with her, helping pack up her equipment and clothes while avoiding the back of the cabin where the crawl space remained marked with county inspection tape. I can't believe I almost paid them $20,000, Lena said, loading boxes into Ethan's truck. You would have if you'd been alone, Ethan said. That's what they were counting on. I'm glad I wasn't alone, Lena said, and the way she looked at him made his chest tighten. Back at the cabin, they converted the guest room into a proper office for Lena. Ethan built her a desk from reclaimed barn wood, and Mason helped organize her supplies, carefully arranging her pencils by color, even though Lena assured him she didn't need them that organized. It looks better this way, Mason insisted. You're absolutely right, Lena said seriously. Lena called the Boulder nonprofit and proposed the hybrid work arrangement. To her surprise, they agreed immediately, citing budget savings on office space and appreciating the optics of their lead designer actually living in the kind of rural community they were trying to serve. They said it would add authenticity to the project, Lena told Ethan, hanging up the phone with a stunned expression. They actually thanked me for suggesting it. Told you it would work, Ethan said. You're annoyingly right sometimes, Lena said. Only sometimes? She threw a pillow at him. That weekend, Ruth came over for dinner and didn't even try to hide her satisfaction at seeing Lena still there. I knew it, Ruth said, settling into a chair with a glass of wine. The moment I saw you two together, I thought, those two are going to figure it out. Figure what out? Mason asked. That they like each other, Ruth said. I already knew that, Mason said. Dad smiles different when Lena's around. Ethan felt his face heat. I do not. You do? Mason said matter-of-factly. It's a good smile, though. Better than your regular smile. How many smiles do I have? At least 5, Mason said. There's your normal smile, your tired smile, your Mason please stop talking smile, your I'm pretending to listen smile, and your Lena smile. Ruth laughed so hard she nearly spilled her wine. The kid's not wrong, Lena was grinning. I want to see this Lena smile. You're seeing it right now, Mason said. Ethan gave up and focused on his dinner, trying to ignore the heat in his face. After Ruth left and Mason was asleep, Ethan and Lena sat on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and watching the stars emerge against the black sky. I talked to my parents today, Lena said, told them about the project, about staying here. What did they say? My mom asked if I was seeing someone, Lena said. I said maybe. She said I sounded happy. I said I was. Are you? Ethan asked. Happy? Lena turned to look at him, her face barely visible in the darkness. Happier than I've been in a long time, scared too, but the good kind of scared. I know what you mean, Ethan said. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the wind move through the trees. I need to go to Boulder tomorrow, Lena said. Meet with the team, finalize the contract, find an apartment for my work week stays. How long will you be gone? 3 days? Maybe 4? Lena said. Is that okay? I mean, I know I'm not technically living here yet, but it's okay, Ethan interrupted. And you are living here, or you will be. We'll figure out the details. Just like that? Lena asked. Just like that, Ethan confirmed. The next morning, Ethan helped Lena load her car with the essentials she'd need for the trip. Mason insisted on making her a sandwich for the road, which resulted in a creation involving peanut butter, jelly, and what appeared to be crushed crackers. "It's a special recipe," Mason explained, wrapping it carefully in foil. "I can see that," Lena said, accepting it solemnly. "Thank you." "Will you come back?" Mason asked, his voice suddenly small. "Of course," Lena said, kneeling down to his level. "I'm just going for a few days. Then I'll be back." "Promise?" "Promise," Lena said, and held out her pinky. Mason hooked his pinky around hers, sealing the deal. Ethan walked her to the car, suddenly unsure what to say. They'd kissed a few more times over the past days, soft and tentative, but this felt different. This was the first test of whether the plan they'd made would actually work. "Hey," Lena said, reading his expression. "I'm coming back. This is real." "I know," Ethan said. You're scared I'll get down there and change my mind," Lena finished. "I won't. This is where I want to be. You and Mason. This is what I want." Ethan pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms. "Drive safe." "I will," Lena said. "I'll call you when I get there." She kissed him once more, quick and sweet, then climbed into her car and drove down the driveway. Ethan and Mason stood on the porch, waving, until her taillights disappeared around the bend. "She's coming back, right?" Mason asked. "She's coming back," Ethan said, hoping he was right. The next 3 days felt strangely empty. Ethan threw himself into work, finishing the Hendersons' dining table and starting on a commission for a bookshelf. Mason went back to school, came home full of stories about playground politics, and asked every evening when Lena would be back. "Soon," Ethan kept saying, checking his phone more often than he wanted to admit. Lena called every night, telling them about her meetings, about the apartment she'd found in Boulder that was small but affordable, about the team's enthusiasm for the project. She always asked about Mason's day, about Ethan's work, about whether the weather was holding. "I miss you guys," she said on the third night. "We miss you too," Ethan said, and meant it more than he'd expected to. On the fourth day, Ethan was in the workshop when he heard a car in the driveway. He looked up to see Lena's sedan pulling in, and something in his chest unknotted. Mason heard it too and came running from the house. "Lena's back! Lena's back!" She climbed out of the car, laughing as Mason launched himself at her. "Hey kiddo, miss me?" "So much," Mason said. "Dad's been weird without you." "I have not," Ethan protested, walking over. "You made pasta 3 times," Mason said. "We never have pasta 3 times in a week." "I was experimenting with recipes," Ethan said. "You made the same recipe 3 times," Mason corrected. Lena grinned at Ethan. "Sounds like I was missed." "Maybe a little," Ethan admitted. That evening, after Mason was asleep, Lena spread out papers on the kitchen table. The signed contract, the project timeline, the budget breakdown. "It's official," she said. "I start in 2 weeks, 3 days a week in Boulder, the rest of the time here. And they love the idea of incorporating local craftsmen. They want to meet you." "Me," Ethan said. "You," Lena confirmed. "I showed them photos of your work. They want you to submit a proposal for custom furniture pieces for the first phase of development. Tables, benches, shelving units, all made from reclaimed Colorado wood." Ethan stared at her. "That's a huge contract." "I know," Lena said. "And I know you said you didn't want to scale up. But this isn't scaling up. It's just a bigger version of what you already do. And you'd have full creative control. They're not looking for mass production. They want quality. They want your quality." Ethan sat down, processing. "I'd need to hire help. Maybe set up a proper workshop space. Figure out supply chains for the reclaimed wood." "There's a warehouse in Pine Ridge that's being torn down next month," Lena said. "I already talked to the owner. He's willing to sell you the lumber for cost if you haul it yourself." "You've been busy," Ethan said. "I told you," Lena said. "You helped me. Now I'm helping you." Ethan looked at the papers, at the numbers, at the possibilities spreading out in front of him. 4 years ago, he'd walked away from ambition. He told himself he just wanted a simple life. But maybe simple didn't have to mean small. Maybe it just meant choosing what mattered. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." Lena's face lit up. "Really?" "Really," Ethan confirmed. But I'm going to need your help with the design specs. I'm good with wood, but you're the architect. Deal, Lena said and kissed him. Over the next 2 weeks, the cabin transformed. Lena officially moved her base of operations to the guest room, though her belongings slowly migrated throughout the house. Her books appearing on the living room shelves, her coffee mug claiming a permanent spot in the kitchen cabinet, her jacket hanging beside Ethan's by the front door. Mason accepted her presence as if she'd always been there, incorporating her into his routines with the easy adaptability of childhood. She helped with homework, joined in on bedtime stories, and even attempted to learn the rules of his increasingly complex dinosaur battle game. The pterodactyl can't attack the triceratops from behind, Mason explained patiently. That's against the rules. Which rules? Lena asked. The ones you made up yesterday or the ones you're making up right now? The permanent rules, Mason said, as if this clarified everything. Ethan started preliminary work on the furniture project, driving down to Pine Ridge to meet with the warehouse owner and assess the reclaimed lumber. The wood was beautiful, old-growth pine with rich amber tones, oak beams with hand-cut mortises, walnut planks worn smooth by decades of use. This is incredible, he told Lena, running his hands over a massive beam. Look at this grain, look at the character. How much can you take? Lena asked. All of it, Ethan said. We're going to need a bigger truck. They rented a flatbed and spent a weekend hauling lumber back to the cabin, stacking it in the workshop and along the side of the house under tarps. Mason helped, carrying smaller pieces and organizing them by size, taking his role as assistant very seriously. This one's too heavy for me, he'd announce, and Ethan or Lena would come help. But this one I can do myself. Ruth stopped by one afternoon and surveyed the operation with approval. You two are really doing this, aren't you? Doing what? Ethan asked, setting down another load. Building a life together, Ruth said. Properly, not just playing house. We're not playing house, Lena said. We're actually living in a house. You know what I mean, Ruth said. And I'm glad. You're good for each other. You're good for Mason. Thanks, Ruth, Ethan said. Don't thank me, Ruth said. Just invite me to the wedding. Ruth, Ethan protested. What? I'm old. I don't have time to wait around for you two to figure out what's obvious to everyone else. Lena laughed. I like her. Everyone does, Ethan said. That's the problem. When Lena left for her first official week in Boulder, it was different from the previous trip. This time, she left half her clothes in the closet, her toothbrush in the bathroom, a note on the refrigerator reminding Ethan that Mason had a dentist appointment on Thursday. I'll be back Friday night, she said, kissing them both goodbye. Be good. We're always good, Mason said. That's debatable, Lena said, grinning, and she did come back Friday night, and the next Friday, and the one after that, until the rhythm became routine. 3 days in Boulder working on site, 4 days at the cabin working remotely and helping Ethan with the furniture designs. The project came together gradually. Ethan built sample pieces, a dining table with live edges, a bench with hand-forged iron legs, shelving units that looked like they'd been standing for 100 years. Lena photographed everything, presenting it to the nonprofit team, who approved each piece with enthusiasm. This is exactly the aesthetic we want, the project director told them during a video call. Rustic but refined, sustainable but beautiful. You two make a great team. We do, Lena agreed and squeezed Ethan's hand under the table. Months passed. The Boulder project moved from planning to construction, the first phase breaking ground in early summer. Ethan completed the first round of furniture pieces, and they were installed in the development's community center. His tables, his benches, his shelves, all fitting perfectly into Lena's spaces. The day they went to see the completed installation, Mason came with them, running through the building and marveling at everything. Dad made this? He asked, touching one of the tables. He did, Lena said. It's really good, Mason said seriously. Like museum good. Thanks, bud, Ethan said, his throat tight. They stood in the community center, surrounded by the evidence of their collaboration, and Ethan realized that this partnership, this blending of skills and vision, was better than anything he could have built alone. That night, back at the cabin, after Mason was asleep and the dishes were done, Ethan pulled Lena onto the porch. The summer air was warm, the stars brilliant overhead. I have something to ask you, he said. Okay,
Lena said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Ruth keeps asking when we're getting married, Ethan said. Lena laughed. Ruth asked me that too. What do you tell her? That we're taking things one day at a time, Lena said. What if we stopped taking things one day at a time? Ethan asked. What if we made it official? Lena went very still. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I don't have a ring yet, Ethan said, and I know this is fast, but I also know that what we have is real. You've become part of this family, part of my life, part of everything that matters. And I don't want to wait anymore. I want you here, permanently, legally, officially. I want to build this life with you for real. Lena's eyes were shining. Yes. Yes? Yes, Lena repeated, laughing through tears. Of course, yes. I've been waiting for you to ask. Ethan kissed her, deep and certain, and felt the last piece of his life click into place. They told Mason the next morning over pancakes. Lena's going to be part of our family officially now, Ethan said. We're getting married. Mason looked up from his syrup-drenched plate. Does that mean she's staying forever? Forever, Lena confirmed. Mason considered this, then nodded. Good. I like her being here. Just like? Lena teased. I love her being here, Mason corrected, and went back to his pancakes as if he hadn't just made Lena start crying into her coffee. The wedding was small, held in the clearing behind the cabin on a brilliant autumn afternoon. Ruth officiated, declaring she'd been waiting for this moment since the day Lena showed up in a towel. Mason was the ring bearer, taking his job very seriously and only dropping the rings once. Lena's parents came up from Phoenix, charmed by the mountains and by Ethan's quiet steadiness. A handful of friends from Boulder attended, along with what felt like half of Pine Ridge. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, Lena promising to always tell Ethan when he was being too stubborn, Ethan promising to always believe in Lena's wildest ideas. They slipped rings onto each other's fingers, kissed while everyone cheered, and walked back down the aisle to a future that felt both uncertain and absolutely right. The reception stretched into the evening, tables spread with food, music playing from someone's portable speaker, dancing in the grass as the sun set over the ridge. Mason ran wild with the other kids, high on cake and attention. Ruth pulled Ethan aside at one point and hugged him fiercely. You did good, she said. Both of you. Thanks for believing in us, Ethan said. Someone had to, Ruth said. Might as well be me. As the party wound down and the last guest departed, Ethan and Lena stood on the porch, watching the stars emerge. Mason was asleep inside, exhausted from the excitement. The cabin glowed warm behind them, full of the evidence of their life together. Lena's design sketches on the table, Ethan's woodworking tools in the shop, Mason's toys scattered across the floor. So this is it, Lena said. We're married. We're married, Ethan confirmed. How do you feel? Like everything that happened before was just practice, Ethan said. Like this is where my life actually starts. Lena leaned against him. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd end up married to a mountain woodworker I'd only known for a few months, I would have thought they were crazy. Are we crazy? Ethan asked. Probably, Lena said. But I think the best things are. They stood there in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds. The wind in the trees, an owl calling somewhere in the forest, the distant rush of the creek. You know what I realized? Lena said after a while. That night I showed up here, I wasn't just running from a broken pipe. I was running from a life that didn't fit anymore. And I ended up finding the one that did. I'm glad you knocked on my door, Ethan said. I'm glad you answered, Lena replied. The months that followed settled into a pattern that felt both comfortable and expansive. The Boulder project continued, with Lena spending 3 days a week on site and the rest working remotely. Ethan's furniture business grew beyond the housing development, with orders coming in from other architects who'd seen his work. He hired a part-time assistant from Pine Ridge, a young guy named Travis who was good with his hands and eager to learn. Lena officially closed on the Boulder apartment and let the lease lapse, choosing instead to stay in hotels on her workdays. It was more expensive, but it meant she could come home to the cabin every weekend without feeling torn between two places. This is home, she said simply. Boulder's just where I work. Mason thrived, growing taller and more confident.
his vocabulary expanding to include words like sustainable design and joinery techniques. He told his teacher that his dad was a master craftsman and his mom was an architect. And when Lena got the call about the mom designation, she cried for 20 minutes. "Is that okay?" Ethan asked, worried. "If it's too much, it's perfect," Lena said. "It's everything." They established traditions: Sunday pancakes, Tuesday movie nights, Friday afternoon workshop time where all three of them worked on projects together. Mason building with scraps of wood, Lena sketching designs, Ethan teaching his son how to use tools safely. "Remember," Ethan would say, guiding Mason's hands, "the saw is a tool, not a toy. Respect it, and it respects you." "Like how I have to respect vegetables?" Mason asked. "Exactly like that," Lena said, trying not to laugh. The second phase of the boulder development began, and Lena proposed something ambitious: a community workshop space where residents could learn woodworking, metalworking, and other trades. The nonprofit loved it, and Ethan found himself not just building furniture, but designing the workshop itself, planning the layout, choosing the equipment. "You're becoming an architect," Lena teased. "I'm becoming your partner," Ethan corrected. "There's a difference." "Not much of one," Lena said. They drove down to Pine Ridge one afternoon to file paperwork for the workshop project, stopping at the community office to submit the permits. The same clerk who'd processed Ethan's business license 4 years earlier looked up at them with recognition. "Mr. Carter," she said, "and this must be the architect I've heard so much about." "Lena Carter," Lena said, still getting used to the new last name. "Nice to meet you." "You two are doing good work up there," the clerk said, stamping the forms. "The whole town's talking about it. Local wood, local labor, building something that actually matters." "We're trying," Ethan said. "You're succeeding," the clerk said. "Keep it up." Outside, in the falling snow, Mason ran ahead laughing, trying to catch snowflakes on his tongue. Ethan and Lena walked behind him, their hands linked, watching their son play. "You know what's funny?" Lena said. "A year ago, I was terrified of commitment, terrified of putting down roots, and now I can't imagine being anywhere else." "What changed?" Ethan asked. "I found people worth staying for," Lena said simply. "You and Mason. You made staying feel less like giving something up and more like gaining everything." Ethan pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Same." The workshop project opened the following spring, and it was everything Lena had envisioned: bright and spacious, filled with quality tools and natural light, designed to welcome both experienced craftsmen and curious beginners. They held a community open house, and half the town showed up, marveling at the space, asking questions about classes and membership. Travis ran the day-to-day operations, with Ethan teaching weekend workshops and Lena occasionally leading design seminars. Mason appointed himself the unofficial tour guide, showing visitors around with the confidence of someone who'd watched his parents build something from nothing. "This is the wood shop," he'd explain, pointing to different areas. "And that's the metalworking station. And over there's where my dad teaches people how to not cut their fingers off." "Mason," Ethan would say, but he was smiling. On the 1-year anniversary of the night Lena had knocked on their door, they threw a small party at the cabin. Ruth came, of course, along with Travis, a few Boulder colleagues, and several Pine Ridge neighbors. They grilled burgers, told stories, and laughed as Mason reenacted Lena's arrival with dramatic flair. "And then she was just standing there," Mason said, wrapped in a towel for effect, "in the snow, and Dad was like, 'Oh no, a frozen stranger.'" "I did not say that," Ethan protested. "You were thinking it," Lena said, grinning. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Ethan stood on the porch watching the sun set over the ridge. Lena joined him, sliding her arm around his waist. "A year ago," she said quietly, "I was running through a blizzard in a towel, thinking my life was falling apart." "And now?" Ethan asked. "Now I'm standing here with my husband, watching our son play in the yard of our home, thinking about the workshop we built, and the projects we're planning, and the life we've created." She looked up at him. "Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best things." "Sometimes a storm brings exactly what you need," Ethan agreed. They stood there together as darkness fell, lights beginning to appear in windows across the valley, stars emerging overhead. Inside, Mason was showing Ruth his latest dinosaur acquisition, his voice carrying through the open door. The workshop sat silent in the distance, ready for tomorrow's work. The mountains stood eternal, holding them all. And in that moment, Ethan understood something fundamental. That home wasn't just a place, and family wasn't just blood, and sometimes the best things in life came from answering the door when a stranger knocked in the middle of a storm. Sometimes all it took was seeing someone, really seeing them, and deciding to fight for them even when you had no obligation to do so. Sometimes courage looked like a woman walking half a mile in a towel through freezing darkness because she refused to give up. Sometimes love looked like a man crawling through a freezing crawl space to prove a stranger's innocence. Sometimes family looked like a little boy who called someone mom because she'd shown up and stayed and made his world bigger. And sometimes the greatest adventure wasn't about going somewhere new. It was about discovering that the life you were building one day at a time with the people who mattered most was exactly the one you were meant to live. Lena squeezed his hand. "What are you thinking about?" "Just that I'm glad you knocked on my door," Ethan said. "Best decision I ever made," Lena replied. And as they turned to go inside to join their son and their friend and the warmth of their home, Ethan realized that sometimes the best stories didn't have dramatic endings. They had quiet beginnings that turned into lasting foundations. They had moments of crisis that revealed character. They had two people choosing each other again and again until choosing became as natural as breathing. The door closed behind them. The lights glowed warm. The mountain held its secrets. And three people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances continued building a life that was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. Because in the end, that's what love was. Showing up, staying present, and building something beautiful out of whatever materials life handed you, even if those materials started with a broken pipe and a desperate knock on a stranger's door in the middle of a winter storm. Sonnet 4.5.